We still have a couple folks trickling in. As you join us, please make sure you put the organization that you're with and where you're joining us from in the chat box. That's a great way for us to see who's here. And it's also how we're going to be keeping track of our attendance so we can record who is able to attend today and who we might want to follow up with to make sure they're onboarding appropriately for the program. We have a great crowd. We have our entire grant staff here today, and we do have a really robust presentation for you. And just so you know, we will provide the PDF slides for this as well as that recording to anyone. So don't feel like you have to take screenshots or copy down everything on the screen. We will provide that for you. And there is a lot of technical information. So given that, I'm going to jump right in, and we hope to have at the end some time for questions. And at that time, we can close down our PowerPoint and turn on cameras if we'd like, so that we can have a little bit more conversation and discussion with all of you. All right, as I said, we have a lengthy agenda today. We're going to hit a lot of topics, some of them more broad, a couple more deeply. We'll be going into some items. We also have a number of questions that we've received many times throughout the course of this application period and through the lifetime of HAVA. So we're going to cover those. And then, as I said, hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. We'll pause in between some of our topics for questions, but if you have one, please feel free to raise your hand or unmute and ask your question. All right.
Sorry, Tina. In fact, this is Sammy Cordova, also with the EAC. If your name, your username here on Zoom is maybe just a full name or it doesn't have your first and last name, could you quickly pop that in the chat as well, just to make sure that we catch everyone who is here? Thanks. Sorry, Tina.
Thanks, Amy. All right, so this is our EAC Office of Grants Management, and I'm going to turn my camera on just for a moment so you can put a face to a name, and if any other team members would like to do that, I invite you to do so. The EAC is a small federal agency, and this is our grants team of 5 folks. You can see Risa Garza is our grants director. Risa, would you like to say a quick hello?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to say this is the first time in over 10 years that the EAC is offering the Help America Vote College program. So we're very excited to have you guys as grantees and to restart this program. Welcome.
Thanks, Risa. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our office, what we do, and how we're going to work with each of you. When you receive your notice of your award, your NOA, you'll be given a grant specialist. That'll be one of the 5 of us. That person will be working with you on your reporting, any questions or technical assistance that you have, as well as fulfilling those risk assessment requirements. We typically work with formula grants, and those are our grantees who are funded based on a formula. Typically that's population size. So those are grantees, often states and territories that we work with over a long period of time. So we're very excited to be working with a discretionary program right now and to get to meet some new folks. So your grant specialist will most likely be reaching out to you in response to some of your reporting or any questions that we have for you regarding your award documents. But you can also always reach out to us. You can reach out to your grant specialist or to those 2 email addresses on the screen there. You can see grants@eac.gov or HAVCP@eac.gov. Those go to all 5 of us. We're actually all remote employees, but we work very collaboratively. And so we typically know what's going on with all of the different grantees. So if one of us can't get back to you, then oftentimes someone else will for whatever reason. So as I said, we will review your expenses and reports as needed. We'll respond to any questions, technical assistance that you have. We advise you on the 2 CFR 200. And if you're unfamiliar, that is the federal guidance for grant management. Those are the rules and regulations that you have all agreed to adhere to by signing those grant agreements. It's a very thorough and lengthy document, and that's why we're here to support you to help answer any questions you have about 2 CFR 200 and how it applies to you and your award. We will conduct those required risk monitorings. That means if you have been labeled as medium or high risk, then we'll be receiving a couple extra documents from you and working with you a little bit more in-depthly. We also provide support during an OIG audit. The EAC does have an independently run Office of Inspector General. They have a really thorough website. It's right there on the screen, oig.eac.gov. So I recommend checking it out. They have a lot of their reports on there. They've also offered that if you have any questions for the OIG, you are welcome to reach out to them right now. We're hoping to have a presentation from them in the coming months about internal controls and fraud detection and things like that. Really great information, especially for folks who may or may not have a ton of familiarity with federal awards. So if you're chosen for an OIG audit, again, this is different from a single audit that you might be undergoing. It could happen during your term award. It could happen after that. You would be working with the OIG as well as with the grant specialist from the EAC through that process. All right, that's a little bit about us and our team and how we will work with you. Here's a quick look at our timeline just for this immediate time frame. Right now, you're all returning those award documents back to us. Those again are due on March 1st, which is in just about a week and a half. So if you have not signed those, please do sign them and get them back to us. If for any reason you can't reach that March 1st deadline, please just let us know. We will then follow up with you about any questions or revisions that we need done on any of those documents. At that time, that's when we'll be reviewing those required budget amendments or narrative revisions. We'll then issue your notice of award, your NOA. We'll send that to you. Please save that in your records with your grant agreement and your award letter. We will also be sending that NOA to our treasury and to the PMS system, that's payment management system. It'll take about 2 to 3 weeks from the time you receive your NOA to the time that you receive notification from us and PMS that your award is ready to be drawn down. And Sammy will go into more detail about accessing PMS as well as your payments in just a few moments. We are going to have an additional PMS training as well with the folks from the payment management system. But just know that after you get your NOA from us, it'll be a little bit of time before you can receive your funds. If you're concerned about getting those funds, if you need them sooner than later, please let us know and we'll do everything we can to accommodate that. For the poll worker program, your reports, both federal and progress reports, are going to be submitted in GLASS. That's the Grant Lifecycle Application System. That's our system for grant management at the EAC. We are currently working on setting up those accounts for you, and you'll receive an email from that act@eac.gov. with your account information. That'll just go to the primary contact on your account. That person will then be able to log in and add additional users as needed. Those reports will be submitted in GLASS. The first one is due at the end of April. We anticipate the GLASS emails going out as well as additional information on your reporting to go out in April as well. Any questions on the timeline? All right, seeing none, I'm going to hand it over to Sammy to talk about payments.
Great. Thank you so much, Tina, and hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. As Tina mentioned, all payments will be processed through the payment management system. That's also known as PMS, for those of you who may have used it before for other federal awards. You'll receive access to PMS after your organization has a fully executed notice of award, NOA. So that's going to happen after we receive back from you your signed grant agreement and any required budget modifications. At that point, we'll issue you your NOA and we'll get you kicked off in PMS. To be ready to complete a drawdown in PMS, your organization must set up 1 or more user accounts within the system and establish your banking information to facilitate electronic fund transfers or EFTs. So all of the funds from this program will be coming to you through EFTs. We will be hosting a training, like Tina said, where the PMS staff are going to come and they will walk you through how to set up those accounts if you don't have one already, how to establish your banking information for the EFT process, and then also how to complete an actual drawdown request within that system. So be on the lookout for more information about when that training is going to be taking place. We should be sending out the time within the next week or so. And the PMS training will also be recorded and posted on the EAC College Program website, just in case you're not able to attend in person or if you want to refer back at a later time. Drawdowns can be requested either in advance of expenses or as reimbursement for expenses you've already incurred. If you are requesting funding in advance, the drawdown request should be timed to limit the amount of time that you have those federal funds held in your organization's account. So in the example that you see here on the slide, you wouldn't want to make that drawdown request just based on a quote or an estimate. You'd want to wait until you're preparing to actually fulfill an invoice. So a good rule of thumb is that you never want to have federal funds in your own account for more than 10 days. And always remember that all expenses must be incurred within the period of performance of the grant, and we have it there on the slide for you. This is a 2-year grant period that started on February 1st of this year. We are allowing for pre-award costs, and I will go into more detail about that on the next slide. Could you go back just one more point on the last slide? Sorry. We will allow, so if activities were completed during that project period there, but you don't get the invoice for it, or you're not prepared to pay until after that period, you do have 120 days after the end of the project period. It's called the liquidation period, to pay for expenses that you incurred for activities that happened within the project period. So don't stress too much about that right now. You'll get more information as the grant period is coming to a close about sort of the end of life cycle process and what that closeout will look like. Okay, go ahead and go to pre-award costs for me, please. Awesome. So pre-award costs are allowable as long as they were incurred on or after November 16th of last year. And that was the date that this funding opportunity was posted on grants.gov. So the idea there is that we want to make sure that any expenses that are included in grant budgets and that we're using grant funds to pay for were incurred in response to this funding opportunity, rather than us using grant funds to pay for activities that your organization was going to complete anyway. And if you did include pre-award costs in your budget, the way that you would look to get approval to be able to draw down and reimburse yourself for those pre-award costs is you'll send a request to the college program inbox, which is right there on the slide. It's HAVCP@eac.gov. And that request should include a description of the activities, the dates the costs were incurred, how much the costs were, and then supporting documentation for those costs. So, your receipts, invoices, whatever it may have been for those activities. And again, those expenses should have been included in your approved grant budget at the time of application. So when your assigned EAC grant specialist gets that request from you, they're going to be checking those activities against your approved program narrative and program budget, as well as ensuring that that supporting documentation you send along fits within federal requirements. So I'll pause here. Do we have any questions? Okay, Tina, if you want to move to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about grant documentation. So as Tina mentioned, we are working on scheduling a session with our Office of Inspector General, who can go into more detail about these topics, but I do want to just touch on them pretty quickly here, since you could have already started incurring costs. So we want to make sure we're capturing everything as early as possible. So you want to make sure that you're creating and maintaining supporting documentation for every expense that you're going to count both towards your grant funds, but also your match funds. Your match funds are now part of this grant, and they need to be documented the same way that the federal funds you're using for your program need to be documented. Make sure that you're keeping documentation for the entire life cycle of an expense, not just the actual payment. looking back at a promotional t-shirt as an example, you would want to keep documentation of any quotes or estimates that you solicited when you were trying to select a vendor, the invoice you used to actually fulfill the order, the canceled check or payment confirmation, on all the way through to the packing slip that comes with the t-shirts when you finally get them. You want to make sure you're maintaining all of that, because that could become auditable, that entire sort of expense life cycle. So make sure you're holding on to those materials when you get them. You also want to ensure that you're following your organization's internal controls, which are your own policies and procedures. If you're not sure or you're not familiar with your organization's policies, you can typically look to your finance department, maybe administration, or an office of sponsored programs if you're an institution of higher education, and they will hopefully be able to give you more detail, a copy of those policies, and some guidance on how to implement them. It's also important to confirm that any internal controls that you are going to be using for this grant program fits within federal regulations for the use of federal grant funds, and possibly state regulations where they apply if you are a state entity. And if you have any questions about internal controls, federal regulations, anything like that, you can always reach out to your assigned grant specialist and they'll be able to give you more information. And I do just want to touch really quickly on sufficient documentation for staff time. I know we have a number of grantees who are going to be paying for staff with these grant funds. So if you are one of those, you're going to be using grant funds to pay for staff. Their time towards grant activities needs to be documented, again, in accordance with federal regulations and your organization's internal controls. So if that staff member is only performing grant activities on this one grant, then that could look like a periodic attestation at least every 6 months that 100% of their time and effort is going towards the grant. You just put a copy of that in their personnel file, a copy in your grant file, and you'll be good to go. If you have a staff member that's working on more than one grant, including this grant, or they split their time between this grant and other non-grant activities, then you would be more likely looking at a timesheet or a personnel activity report indicating not only the hours that they worked on this grant in a given period, but also accounting for all of the hours that they worked during that pay period. So we need to make sure we're seeing, the totality of their work hours so that we can make sure that the amount that's being charged to the grant is reflective of the amount of their time that they're spending on the grant. Tina, if you want to go ahead, we can talk about risk assessment. So as part of the awards process, we perform risk assessments for all grantees as required by federal regulation. So the grantee risk level was scored based on a number of elements, including your organization's prior federal grants management experience, any exclusions or risk factors noted on sam.gov, which is the system for award management, where you got your UEI, the type of accounting system your organization is using, as well as any findings in recent audits or a lack of recent audits. Then each grantee was categorized as low, medium, or high risk based on the results of that risk assessment. And your risk level, if you're not sure, it would have been included in your grant agreement, the risk level that you were categorized into, as well as the required compliance actions for this monitoring period. And your EAC grant specialist will also be reaching out to you with more detailed information about those required compliance actions for your organization during this period. And that will also happen after you receive your NOA. You can see here on the table that the current monitoring period that we're in runs from February 1st to April 30th of this year, which is 3 months. During this 3-month period, we have all grantees are required to submit financial and progress reports, as well as attend the new grantee orientation. So if you're here today, you're already starting out on a good foot. If you're assessed as medium or high risk, we're also going to ask your organization to submit documentation to support the expenses included in your drawdown request. And I will talk more about this on our next slide. So for now, just to summarize, if you're assessed as high risk, we're also going to be asking you to do a monthly check-in with your grant specialist. These check-ins are just going to be informal, give you the opportunity to connect with your grant specialist on a regular basis about any questions you may have, any challenges you're running into, and anything else the EAC can support your organization and program with. So again, expect a touch from your grant specialist if you are categorized as high risk about getting these meetings on the books. And so this orientation will count as your monthly check-in for February if you're high risk as well. Then we will also be reassessing risk levels periodically. So that's why the current period will end at the end of April. So your organization will have the chance to move down to a lower risk level and a lower amount of compliance activity actions if you meet all of the required monitoring steps for this period. So basically, in May, we're going to be looking, okay, everyone, these organizations completed everything that we asked them to do. So we feel, much better about them, and we feel like they're on a good foot. And so we can scoot them down to a lower risk level. On the other hand, if your organization is not meeting the required compliance actions within this monitoring period, we may need to look at moving your organization up to a higher risk level. And so I want to emphasize that the goal of this risk monitoring and the compliance actions is to provide your organization with real-time ongoing training and technical assistance as you implement your program. We're not trying to catch you making a mistake. We want to be here to support your organization and your program to succeed. And so as a heads up, these grants will be subject to auditing, not only by the EAC Office of the Inspector General, as we mentioned earlier, but also potentially through a single audit or a programmatic audit that's conducted by your organization or your state. And we found on the EAC side that audit findings often come from having insufficient internal controls or not following established procedures and policies. So your grant specialist is available. They're a resource for you to make sure that you're following your own guidelines as well as federal and state guidelines where they may apply for both the financial and the programmatic elements of your grant program. So if you're ever in doubt, reach out to your grant specialist for guidance. If we move to the next slide, I'll give a bit more information about, for those of you who are designated as high or medium risk, about that supporting documentation. So if you are labeled as high risk, then we're asking you to submit supporting documentation for all of the drawdowns that you make during this monitoring period, so through April 30th. If you're medium risk, we're asking that you only submit that documentation for your first drawdown of this monitoring period. And the documentation does not have to be submitted prior to initiating the drawdown. The sequence of events is that sort of submitting that extra documentation to your grant specialist will be a follow-up to initiating the drawdown in PMS. So step one, you go into PMS and complete. You can see here, this is what the drawdown request screen is going to look like within PMS. You'll submit your request, and then as sort of step two of that process, we'll ask you to send that supporting documentation to your grant specialist. Now, if you would prefer, you can send the supporting documentation to your grant specialist for review before you initiate the drawdown request. So if you want, just an extra set of eyes to make sure everything looks good. We do ask if you're going to look for that sort of pre-approval of a drawdown expense, please send the supporting documentation with a sufficient amount of time to allow your grant specialist to review it. We have a number of grantees and a lot of sort of things on our plates on a day-to-day basis. So we can't guarantee that the review will happen within a specific number of days. So the more time you can provide us, the better, especially if your organization is going to be counting on making a drawdown to get some revenue in to be able to continue your program operations. The more time you can give us to take a look at that documentation, get that approval, and you can get that request into PMS, the better. So again, you're going to be hearing from your assigned grant specialist with more details about any of these compliance actions, monitoring requirements shortly after you receive your notice of award. I'll pause again to see if anyone has any questions. Okay, Tina, I think we're back to you to talk about reporting.
Awesome. Thanks, Sammy. Sammy was tasked with all of the vegetables, all of the hearty information for this presentation. So thanks, Sammy. It's all good stuff. And I do want to take just a moment to do a short pop quiz for everyone. Please answer in the chat how many reports you will have due in the first year of this grant program. Two. Lots of twos. Fabulous. Thanks, everybody. And you're correct. We're going to jump into reporting. And as many of you know, you have two that are due throughout the year. And that's two that includes one federal financial report, and one progress report. So 4 reports total due twice throughout the year. I'm going to talk a little bit more about reporting. Your first report is coming up. That'll be due on April 30th, as I mentioned earlier, and we will send you a little bit more information in April or March about accessing GLASS and about submitting those reports in there. And just a heads up, the federal financial report, your FFR, will be submitted in GLASS, and your progress report will most likely be completed as a Word document and added as an attachment. So what are we looking for in your reports? Your financial report is pretty clear. We're looking for what you spent money on and how much of that, and if you're anticipating spending any more money. For your progress reports, we're looking for what is working, what is not working. And we're also looking for how are you working towards those goals that you identified, your performance measures that you identified in your application. So we will ask for specifics about what the progress is to reach those targets. And I can tell you that your targets are going to be included in your NOA. And that's more of a reminder to us as well as to all of you that we want to check in on how those performance metrics are coming. So we can talk about if we need to adjust anything or if the community need is a little bit different than what you anticipated. We want to work with you on that. Other things to include in your reporting, especially for these grants that are a little bit shorter term, we want to hear from you about any challenges you're facing. If you have any staff turnover or some unanticipated programmatic changes or financial changes, please let us know if they're major or if it's an amendment, which we'll cover a little bit later. Obviously, we'll want to hear about that at the time that it happens. But if you're making a small change, let us know in your progress reports and in your financial reports, all that narrative information. We do read those, and we will get back to you after every report, either with that it's been approved or if we have any additional questions for you. I already mentioned that you'll be getting an email from GLASS about how to log into those accounts. And a quick note that our federal fiscal year is October 1st to September 30th. That one was always tricky for me to remember, so I wanted to put it in here for you. Okay, we're going to move on to FAQs unless someone has questions about reporting or anything else that we've covered thus far. All right, our first FAQ, and just so everyone knows where we get this information from in terms of making determinations about allowability, it's from really two things for us. It's the 2 CFR 200, which is our federal regulations that I mentioned earlier, and it's also HAVA, that's the Help America Vote Act of 2002. Those are the two places that regulate our funding. So when we answer one of your questions, we'll probably reference one of those two things. In terms of food and beverage, this comes right out of 2 CFR 200. It's a very common question. It's seen a lot in federal awards. It's also seen a lot in federal audits. So meals, typically food and beverage, are unallowable with federal funds. There's a couple exceptions to that. What we do see that would be meals while you're on travel or at a conference, typically in the form of per diem. You can see I've included the GSA rates website there at the bottom. it's a good idea to refer to the GSA rates when you're planning per diem. Also check in with your internal policies regarding per diem. The other exception is a meeting where technical information is being disseminated to a singular audience. So basically what we're saying is that if you're hosting a training over a meal or snack period and you have an audience there for the whole time that's engaging in learning technical information, that would be considered allowable to provide a meal. If it's a training that's hosted over several hours, including a meal period, and you're providing technical information, but it's the audience is able to come and go as they please, that would not be allowable because you can't confirm that those folks were there for attending the entire time and actually learning the technical information that's been disseminated. So it's the type of thing that you may want to keep registration and attendance for. And I did put an example there on the screen. We do get a lot of questions about this one, and I think that it will come up a lot for the poll worker program because, as we know, our college students, I went to college and I know that food is a draw for me. Any questions about food and beverage? All right, we're going to move on to promotional items, another draw for college students. And again, this one, we anticipate this coming a lot in this program. Here's the thing with promotional items. Again, this comes from the 2 CFR 200. Promotional items, promotion, marketing, that's allowable under federal regulations. Giveaways are unallowable. So when you're determining things that you want to hand out to folks at an event or to your poll workers, they need to be items that are promoting your program. You can see the t-shirt on the screen as an example. That would be for your ambassadors maybe to wear to drum up more marketing about the program. Again, this is another one that we receive a lot of questions about. You can see the example on the screen. T-shirts, water bottles, keychains, anything that actually has the so-and-so university poll worker program, the website, get more information on it, that would be allowable. If it just said so-and-so university, that would be unallowable. Can you put in the chat, please, if you are planning to use your grant funds for promotional items? Awesome, lots of yeses, a couple no's. Great, thank you. Okay, another favorite topic of ours is get out the vote. And I know we talked a lot about this in our previous orientations that we did for the program. So, get out the vote comes up a lot with HAVA because the Help America Vote Act is intended to improve voter education and the ability to cast votes, access voting. It is not intended to increase voter registration and turnout. So we have a pretty strict line about this. And we also understand that, especially for this program, there may be events and activities where you want to do both at the same time. You can see the example on the screen. Maybe you have a voter registration drive as well as a poll worker drive on the same day, some sort of election fest at your university. That's fine, you can do that. You do need to document and provide some justification about where that money is coming from and how it's clearly delineated between the two different programs. So for all those poll worker activities, you can see in this example, supplies, handouts, buttons, stipends, they're all paid for with these college poll worker funds. while the voter registration fest materials are all paid for with separate funding. You would be tracking all of your ambassadors or student staff time and their timesheets. Hopefully they're separate and working on different programs. Any joint expenses like room rental fees or marketing may be allocated between the two programs. We understand that. You will need to show a formula for how you allocated that. You can see I put an example formula there at the bottom. Based on the anticipated number of registrations for each program, that's how you're going to decide which program is paying for which percentage of those joint expenses. And you can see that FAQ, can I answer voter registration questions at a poll worker? But sure, you can. And we expect that if you're hosting some sort of poll worker recruitment event, you might get questions about any number of things. The primary purpose of the event should be to recruit and train poll workers. All right. Moving on to another question that we've received quite a bit, which is, can I use all the grant funds in the first year? Or what if I want to close my grant early? This grant program, as you all know, is a 2-year grant program. Our first year is obviously a presidential election year. There are many states who may or may not have elections in the second year. We understand that, and understandably, you may not be recruiting poll workers in that year. So if you choose to use your funds either in the majority of the first year or all of them in the first year or before the end of the program period, you are allowed to do that. We will work with you on what that would entail. A couple of things to keep in mind with that. The first is that while your award is open, regardless of the amount of funds you have remaining, all of the reporting is still required until you close it out. At the time of closeout, whether that's at 2 years or before, then we will need your final reports turned in so we can finish closeout of that grant for you, and that will start the clock on your document retention for auditing purposes. The other thing to keep in mind is that early award closure should really be planned and budgeted. So that's why we appreciate these questions that we've received, because I know that you're all thinking about it. It was mentioned in a lot of applications. That's what we want to see, is that you may be saying, look, most of our activities are going to be taking place this fall or this spring, and we would like to budget accordingly, and we will work with you to do that. Something that would raise red flags for us is that we don't talk to you about your award timeline, and then a year down the road or 6 months, you come to me and say, Tina, we're out of money. What do we do? So that would be a little bit of an issue. So if you think this applies to you, please reach out and work with us on the best timeline for your community and those grant funds. I put a small note on extensions on the screen. Just know that if it's coming close to the end of your award and you feel that you're not going to be able to spend all of your funds, reach out to the EAC, and we handle extensions on a case-by-case basis. So if you think that applies to you, reach out early. Pausing for questions, and then we're going to talk about grant amendments. Okay, grant amendments. I mentioned earlier, if you are making a change to your grant program or your budget, you should really let us know. There's a couple requirements for needing a formal amendment. That would mean that you need pre-approval from the EAC, Office of Grants Management, before you implement those changes. They're up on the screen there. If you're making a cumulative budget change greater than 10% of the total award, or if you're changing the overall intent and deliverables of the program. So we'll work through those examples to give you a little bit better understanding of what that means. Basically, if you're making big changes to your grant program, it's something that we want to look at and review to make sure that you're still within the requirements of the program and that the deliverables that you've outlined in your application are either still being met or new deliverables are still allowable and meet the mission of the program. You can see example 1. That does not require an amendment because though you're moving money from different categories in your budget, it's still under 10% of your total award. Say you complete example 1 and then a month later you decide to move additional funding, and the 2 amounts of moved funding combined does exceed 10%, reach out to your grant specialist. We may need you to submit an amendment before you go ahead and make that second change. You can see example 2, that's really changing the whole outcome of the program. A major partner has backed out. As a result, instead of offering monthly poll worker trainings, you'll be sponsoring a multi-county poll worker marketing campaign. So reach out and you can always touch base with us. If you need an amendment, we will let you know. If you do need to request an amendment, this is what you have to do. You will send via email to your grant specialist or to the EAC Office of Grants Management, a couple different things, a description of your request, justification of your request, why is this best for your community, and then the revised template that applies, whether it's your budget narrative, or anything else. We are getting so close to the end of the technical dissemination of information here, folks. Any questions before I hand it over to Sandy one more time? All right, Sandy.
Thanks. Thanks, Tina. This slide should be a little bit more fun than my last slides. So we do want to keep in touch with you, and we want you all to have the opportunity to stay connected with each other as well beyond this orientation. So we have scheduled quarterly program calls that will be informal gatherings to ask questions for the EAC grants team, to network and share with other poll worker and service day grantees, and to hear useful information from other departments within the EAC. So you can see here on the slide, we have all the sessions for 2024 listed. We will be sending out registration and attendance reminders closer to those dates as well. So don't feel like you have to rush to write all of that down. We'll be pinging you closer to those dates. Each session is going to be a mix of a more organized presentation about a specific topic from EAC subject matter experts, with plenty of time for Q&A about that specific topic for that session, as well as an open forum for questions, concerns, feedback you may have for the EAC or for other grantees within your college program cohort. So on that first session in May, we'll be joined by the EAC communications team, and they'll be discussing how to promote programming and events, social media and promotional campaigns, and other ways to get the good word out about your program. And for the second session in July, we'll be joined by the EAC subject matter expert team, who are the minds behind the guidebook for recruiting college poll workers. And they'll be here to talk with us about strategies to engage college students as poll workers, as well as any other questions kind of about engaging college students within the elections process more generally that you all may have. Okay, Tina, you want to get to our final slide? This is the end of our regularly scheduled presentation content. So we do have some time for an open Q&A session right now. Looks like we have about 15 minutes left. So feel free, if you want to raise your hand, just come off mute, put your questions in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But yeah, do you have any questions for us?
And while folks are thinking, I just wanted to mention that our Help America Vote College Program webpage, right now, it's just updated to reflect that awards have been issued, but we will be putting more information and resources for all of you on there. a couple questions about the press kit and the draft of promo materials. So Crystal, you do not need our approval for promotional materials. If you'd like to send them to us, we're happy to look at them. Just as Sammy said, we may or may not have a ton of time. So give us some advance notice, but you don't need our prior approval for those. And Catherine, the press kits, I hope they'll be available soon. Our communications team is working on them. They were just had a heavy lift of getting our annual report out, and then they will be working on the press kit for the college program. And if anyone had an event or a any initiatives for Help America Vote Day on January of this year, please let us know.
A lot of questions. Catherine, at this point, we don't have a date for when the press kit is going to be available, but rest assured, our comms team is working on it as diligently as possible and trying to get those materials out to all of you. Opportunities to hear more about the other projects. We're really hoping that we get good attendance for the quarterly program calls. And we really want to facilitate a space where you all can talk to each other about what you're doing, share ideas, share challenges that you've overcome or that you need help trying to figure out how to overcome. So we really hope that we'll get strong participation in those meetings to be able to facilitate that open space. Requirement to acknowledge the grant funding in our marketing materials. I might need to get back to you on that. Risa, do you?
I don't think there's a requirement to acknowledge the source of the funding, so you can promote it as needed.
Yeah, of course, we'd love it if you maybe throw the EAC logo on there, and we'd love to see your materials as well, just so that we can sort of have them. But no, there isn't a requirement, I think, to acknowledge this funding.
Sammy, I'm just going to stop sharing. So if anybody wants to turn their camera on, you can, and we'll keep answering questions for you guys. And there was a question, Josh, you asked about reducing your deliverables. You certainly should reduce your deliverables if you feel that the award amount impacts that. We certainly understand, and I do want you to work on that now in advance so that there's no surprises. So while it's fresh in your mind, yeah, I recommend reducing. Our partial awards were based on a percentage, so we didn't outline any one or particular things that needed to be removed from your budget. So it's really up to you how to best use that funding to support your program.
Yeah, and just so you're aware, when you get your NOA, it will have those performance measures that you submitted. So if you do feel the need to revise them because of a lower award amount than you initially expected, that will be on your NOA. So it will be well documented that we agreed on those reduced amounts. Sorry, Tina.
No, you're good. The PowerPoint will be available, and we will touch base with our comms team about providing our logo with the press kit, as well as talking about that in May when they're joining us for a presentation about how best to use EAC materials and tagging us in social media and things like that.
Yeah, and Catherine, you can, the notifications, sort of the EAC publicity side, that did go out, I believe last week, maybe the week prior. So feel free to speak publicly, start promoting your program, and start trying to get some college students into programming as soon as possible.
And all of your congressional district representatives should have been notified of the award. So if you're in communication with them, feel free to reach out, see if they want to join with you on some publicity. I love seeing
and just for everybody asking about the press kit, it's likely going to be an adaptation of the press release that the EAC sent out regarding the awards for the program. So if you look on our website, you can find that press release, and you're welcome to adapt that language for your own use as well.
Thanks, Risa.
That's great, Crystal. We're definitely getting into the season. We know we made it a bit of a short turnaround for all of you, so we really appreciate your diligent work on these programs.
If you're familiar with the EVES study, it came out last fall, the 2022 election survey reported that one of the #1 challenges that elections office face is recruiting poll workers, especially younger poll workers. So you're all doing a wonderful thing, and we're really excited to see if that has an impact in your areas. Oh, when will you find out who your grant specialist is? We'll let you know when we send your NOA. We'll tag that person. And yeah, your grant specialist will be working with you one-on-one, but really we work very collaboratively too. So you have access to the entire team.
Yeah. So if in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can always email that HAVCP@eac.gov email. Or if you can't remember that acronym, you can also email grants@eac.gov. That one's a bit easier to remember off the top of your head. And we will make sure that someone gets back to you as soon as possible. Any more questions before we let you all go? Great. We're all very excited to continue the good work together.
Thanks, everybody. Get those grant documents back to us, and we'll send your NOAs out. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.